up a bot farm to. Actually, no, that won't work, will it?
No.
I'll
That's
put
exactly what YouTube have been trying to counter.
I'll put my phone just continually on while I'm at work.
Just buy a bunch of like dodgy, cheap Nokias and just just run them constantly.
So I've got up the race results for Belgium just to compare, and by that I mean the qualifying results.
Yeah, I've got a thing. I've got a line in my script about that.
A real zinger.
Yeah, totally.
Wait, can we say zinger? Is that not trademarked by KFC?
Not a clue.
Well, there is a way to find out, but I'm not going to do it.
You'll get Colonel Sanders kicking down your door.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a floating
Demanding
cat's
money.
rear end.
Ooh.
Oh, good.
There we go.
That's rear end. Goodness.
There we go. He's leaning in. He's leaning in.
He's on the wall. He's on the wall.
For anyone joining us out of this stream, you've missed quite not much.
I was going to say you've missed quite a lot and somehow nothing at all.
Love the random tail just hanging off the gantry. Oh dear.
It's what we want.
It's what the people want. It's what the fans want.
Cats.
Yeah.
I want cats. Right.
I love cats. I love every kind of cat.
Everybody ready to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All good.
Thank you. F1 is back in Zandvoort this weekend, where Max Verstappen has displayed utter dominance at his home Grand Prix qualifying, despite only grabbing pole by a mere 0.038 seconds. Welcome to the F1 Grid Talk podcast. Today we'll be reviewing the 2021 Dutch Grand Prix qualifying. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today we have engineer Owain Medford.
Hello.
Hello. Formula Shakedown Steve Jackson.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we also have Monkeyseat Podcasts Tom Horrox.
Hello.
Hello. So firstly, we'd like to give a shout out to Dajeen76 for leaving us a 5-star review. And if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'll shout out all of you who do to say thanks. So, Owain, Max Verstappen claimed his 6th pole position from the last 7 races today. And if this was Spa, that would be another 12.5 points heading his way. But since we've actually got a race happening tomorrow, touch wood, how confident are you that he'll keep that P1 position?
I'm pretty confident, to be honest. I think he'll actually manage it fairly easily. He just looks kind of, from what I've seen of practice and, in the qualifying, he just looks like he's not really trying because he's so good that he makes it look easy. He's at his home race, everyone's cheering him on. And it's got to be buoying him up because as it was a monster lap from Lewis, I think, to challenge him for second, to challenge him for first in qualifying today, and I don't think that there's enough in the Mercedes really with where the Red Bull is. I think even with Perez being so far down the grid, I think Verstappen probably has the pace to get away from Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. At this point, I think Mercedes' only roll of the dice to try and take it off him come the end of the 72 laps is strategy again, and I'm not even sure that's going to help because it's almost like a quick Monaco in some ways. Very, very easy to make a mistake, and if you do make a mistake, we've seen cars going in the wall left, right, and centre. And I don't think it's going to be easy to get past people, even with a big tyre advantage. So I think it's going to be quite difficult for the Silver Arrows to get past.
Yeah, absolutely. Max Verstappen very much on rails today and setting times that just seem to be so much further ahead of the grid. But I'm just going to stick on Max Verstappen, but also just Zandvoort in general for a minute, Steve. The cars looked mightily fast on the TV cameras today, don't you think?
Yeah, it's an impressive circuit. I think it's probably it's very quickly become one of my favorite tracks to just watch cars go around on. Turn 3 and final corner especially, it's just amazing. just touching on what Owain said before as well, it's a bizarre circuit. It's like Monaco and Suzuka had a baby. It's undulating. It doesn't really give the drivers much of a chance to take a break. And if you get it wrong, and we've seen quite a few people get it wrong this weekend so far, you pay for it. There's either a gravel trap or a bloody great wall that'll stop you very quickly. So it'll definitely take no prisoners. I'm expecting at least one red flag period tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a couple more than one. But yeah, it's an amazing circuit. First time here since '85, I think. So it's in my opinion, it's long overdue. I mean, this is a old school, unforgiving, take no prisoners sort of track. So yeah, my only sort of reservation is just the potential or lack of potential for passing is very narrow. F1 cars are very wide, so it will come down to alternate strategies and that sort of thing, and just going to the strategy side of things as well. The only trick I think Mercedes could possibly pull is getting Bottas in early to force Red Bull to react, and that'll give Lewis the opportunity to stay out for longer on a and potentially pit later on and end up on a fresher pair of tires towards the end. But it really just comes down to I think that first 10-15 lap window and just seeing how much of a lead Verstappen can pull out.
Yeah, and Tom, just on to you again. Like, first of all, what do you think of Zandvoort as a track after what we've seen so far? But also, do you think it's going to be a race won on strategy tomorrow?
I absolutely love that analogy of Monaco and Suzuka having a baby. That's absolutely brilliant. And then I think great Uncle Portimao sitting in the chair as well, because it did remind me a lot of Portimao with all the elevation changes and that's kind of the roller coaster nature of it. So yeah, stunning to watch. I love what a lot of tracks are doing these days with the coloured curbs. It really helps you identify what track you're at, and because sometimes the tracks can be a bit, the Tilke tracks especially can be a bit samey. So to see like these coloured curbs, Silverstone going to black and Monza having the Italian flag colours on theirs as well. I think Brazil had different coloured curbs as well. So it's just a lot easier to see where you're at now. So I really like that for the track. And the race itself, yeah, it's going to be a strategy race. I think you're going to see France-Barcelona style race. I have no idea who is going to win. I have absolutely no idea. But with Perez being out in Q1, it's definitely given Mercedes it's given them an edge that Red Bull can't counter with Perez out of the picture. So that's a plus for Mercedes. But Verstappen has the quickest car. Clearly, he's the guy in form. He, as you said, he looks like he's not even trying. It's just that comfortable. He doesn't look like he's on the edge, whereas Hamilton and Bottas are definitely on the edge, trying to chase them down. So it's going to be feisty. I think if they can stay within a second or two of Max Verstappen in those opening phases through the dirty air, then I think Mercedes have got a great chance of winning. And I think Christian Horner's already alluded to the undercut and how much of a threat that is, and that they've got to remember who they're fighting, which tells me that they may well sacrifice a race win for Verstappen finishing ahead of Hamilton. I'll believe it when I see it, but that's a very real possibility. So an outside bet on a Valtteri Bottas win would not be a stupid bet this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've already touched on this. Verstappen ended up finishing 0.03 of a second ahead of Lewis Hamilton and didn't even have DRS for that final straight as well. So, Steve, let's move on to Lewis Hamilton starting P2. So close to denying Max Verstappen that home celebration. But, it's all about tomorrow because we're not in Spa anymore. So, Lewis Hamilton's race, what are you expecting?
Makes you wonder if they were sandbagging a little bit, because that just came out of nowhere. Really, really impressive lap. He did very, very well, especially considering it's been a very patchy weekend for everyone, but for Lewis especially. Obviously, he had that oil pressure issue in FP2, which basically wrote him off for the session, and FP1 was obviously the Seb show again with that 37-minute red flag. So he's been playing catch up for most of the weekend. So the fact that he managed to sort of scrounge together that quality of lap was really good. He's not looked his usual smooth, calm, collected self. I think it is a very, very different circuit to what everyone's used to. Max might be sort of buoying himself off the fact that he's basically 99% of the crowd is there for him. So there might be a psychological element there, which Lewis may not necessarily have. But yeah, I'm thinking he'll be there or thereabouts tomorrow. But again, it's going to be very, very tricky to pass, and that's where Max will basically he'll see that and he'll recognize it and just do everything he possibly can to just keep Lewis behind him, because I think if Lewis can get in front, that's a Mercedes either side of the Red Bull. They can start playing all sorts of games and just sort of ruin Mr. Spicer's day. So yeah, I'm thinking Lewis will put his foot down. He doesn't really have a choice. Things are still very tight in the championship, so they're not really in a position to be able to just sit back and take the points they can. They need everything they can possibly get out of the race tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, as of last weekend, a 1-2 will change the order of the top if it's Max Verstappen at the start. So, Tom, Valtteri Bottas, we've already mentioned, Mercedes can throw him at the pit stops to try and force a mistake from Red Bull, but, it looked for most of this weekend that he was going to be ahead of Lewis because, either Lewis was off the pace or didn't have the running because of his oil thing. But right at the last second, Lewis Hamilton comes along and, puts him back into third. Valtteri Bottas is suggestedly fighting for his race drive. Some people think that there's already a done deal. Being behind Lewis again is not quite what he needed at this point.
No, I mean, he's 3/10 off him, which pretty much exactly 3/10 off him. So I think given that, I think we all know, and I think he knows what's happening next year. It's all but. I think the contracts are signed. It's just going through all the legal stuff. So he's not fighting for a seat, and the fact that he's been impressive all weekend, I think is actually very, very promising. I think maybe this kind of cloud is starting to lift. Now he's got clarity. He knows what's coming next year. So yes, he has been done by his teammate, but that's nothing new. It's not new to see Lewis Hamilton beating Valtteri Bottas. I know Bottas has been closer in qualifying up until kind of mid part of last year, but this season he's been nowhere compared to Hamilton. But he seems to be, he's been qualifying sort of 4th, 5th, 6th sometimes in these races, and in a race, in a qualifying session where you had to keep a cool head, put in your best times when you had them, and pressure was on constantly. He could well have ended up going the way of Sergio Perez. I know I said this in our group chat. Why did I not tell anyone I predicted Perez to go out in Q1? I predicted Perez or Bottas to go out in Q1, and I didn't tell anyone. And I just really thought that was going to happen. And it could well have been Bottas as the one who went out, but he didn't. He kept a cool head. He worked with the traffic and he put the lap times in when it counted. And yes, he's not beaten Lewis overall, but he's right there with him doing the team job. And as I said earlier, I do think he could end up in a position to win this race despite being the third quickest guy on track, or potentially even 4th quickest guy on track. He does have a real chance to win this race tomorrow. So it's actually maybe a light for Valtteri, and to think, well, there is something to race for, and hopefully he's going to have a much more pleasant second half of the season than his first half, which has been kind of peak Bottas in recent times.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully a much better start to the second half of the season. But Alfa Romeo will certainly be happy with his performance today, won't they? So, Owain, Pierre Gasly in P4, absolute magic from this man this season, in terms of qualifying. He's always pretty much been around P6, but, he's taken those opportunities where, you've got drivers like Perez and the Ferraris being behind him, and put AlphaTauri in P4 for the Dutch Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's not the Honda engine car you'd expect to see in P4, is it? He's been, like you say, he was kind of floating around the 5th and 6th area before the summer break. But whatever he's done on his holidays, it's clearly worked out quite well, because he's up in P4, and yeah, he's helped a little bit by the fact that some of the events that have played out in Q1 and Q2 have lifted him maybe and taken out some of the competition that he would be having. But you still have to put the lap on the board. And, Leclerc, Sainz, and Ocon and Alonso, even Ricciardo, they're no slouch. Like, they're not slow drivers whatsoever. And to qualify ahead of them, I think the car helps a lot. The AlphaTauri seems very, very good this season. A number of tracks, and this is sort of one that seems to suit it a little bit, I think, more than others maybe. But he's pulled it out of the hat, and he's flunked it on the second row. He'd do well, to be honest, within the Red Bull family at least, to try and give the Mercedes a bit of trouble at the start, and as much as he can through the race as well, if he's able to. I think the Mercedes will probably drive away because it's a Mercedes still. But stranger things have happened, particularly this season. So he's well within the realms of possibility of challenging for a podium. I think should a couple of things go his way. Mercedes have been known to mess up, and you've just got to be there to profit on it if they can.
I mean, all it takes is a collision between one of those cars that's in the top. Two of those cars at least in the top three, and that'll put Pierre Gasly up in the top three. So. Steve, Charles Leclerc in P5 for Ferrari. A very strong weekend considering everything so far for Ferrari, at least.
Yep. Hasn't been outside the top 10, I think, in practice either. And, fifth place for his troubles is very good. He's been it's been a very quiet, productive weekend for Charlie. He's just put his head down and gotten on with it and sort of been relatively conspicuous by his absence. It's exactly the sort of thing that Ferrari need. They're not in the dire straits that they were last year, but they've still got a fair amount of work to do. I still believe that both he and Carlos are putting those cars in places where they don't necessarily deserve to be. But with this sort of circuit where it's not as power sensitive, obviously it's worked out for them. It has both Ferraris have looked a little bit nervous. Obviously, one of them came to blows earlier in the day. But for Charles, he's performed well. Like I said before, I think it's the sort of the quiet, productive weekend that he's needed. Last few weekends have been a wee bit up and down for him. So this is, good result. I wouldn't expect him to climb any further. I mean, Pierre Gasly's looking absolutely monstrous in the AlphaTauri, and then, the top three, I don't think he's within reach of getting a hold of them. But top five finishes and outside of the realm of possibility. And I think if that's where he ends up tomorrow, then he should be very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tom, literally 1/100th of a second further back, Carlos Sainz in P6. What a good recovery for the driver, considering, as Steve mentioned, he came to blows with turn 3 in FP3. Obviously, they're both ahead of the McLarens, which will, sadden you a little bit. But, Carlos Sainz, you've got to be happy with that.
Yeah, my second favourite ever Ferrari driver did good today. He's after the crash in practice, I feared for him. I thought he was going to be starting at the back with an engine penalty, but as is, they've avoided an engine penalty, and he's finished 100th behind one of the most highly rated drivers in Formula One. So that's a very impressive performance. Mr. Consistent all through, to be honest. He's I think he's having a great season. It's a very underrated season as well. He's I think his lowest position all season is 11th, and he's finished every race. So that's, considering where Ferrari were, that's brilliant. He's doing better than his teammate in that sense. He seems to have the more peaky results, the more headline-grabbing results, but he's just, he's been called Sunday Science in previous seasons because he just gets on with it on a Sunday, and I think he's likely to do the same tomorrow. It's just great all round for him. Just another reason to underline just how good he is and how good he has been in the past. So, but vicariously, that also means that Lando Norris is really good as well. So I had to have a little comment in there about how good Lando is. But it's a strong performance. I'd be disappointed if he's so close to his teammate and just not outqualify him. But the Ferrari's there in a strong position. They'll be able to challenge into turn 1 and kind of try and move forward in the race from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting a good start is going to be paramount to Ferrari's race strategy tomorrow. And someone who has been known for at least making, at least not falling back at his starts, so Antonio Giovinazzi starting in P7 for the Alfa Romeo. Like, he's been strong all weekend, but considering his recent form, this has come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think it's come out of a certain Williams's crash, to be honest, more than anything else. But it doesn't really matter. He'd put the lap in, and he'd got himself out of Q out of Q2 by that point, and whatever happens after that, isn't really his concern. It's it's sort of I don't think he's sort of struggling for his seat, but the rumors are that the sharks are in the water and they're circling, and sort of in the form of the younger drivers who are looking for seats, and Gio sort of needs to get on with it. It's almost as like he's heard that and given it a kick up the backside, because he's another Ferrari engine car in the top 10, which you wouldn't sort of expect to see really with how it's been. I don't think he's going to I don't think he's going to stay up there. I don't think 7th is where he's going to finish, to be honest. I think it will drop quite quickly. But there's always, as we keep saying, there's a possibility to just stay there, because that it's so hard to overtake, and he might just be able to, if you just pop your car in the right places on the right parts of the track, hopefully he can keep some people behind. But I don't know whether Giovinazzi's maybe, he might not have the ability to do that, or he might just get swallowed up, because Ocon and Alonso and Ricciardo, for that matter, they're going to be wanting that position as much just to get them back in the realms of where they really should be. But you've still got to give credit where it's due, and it's a great performance.
Yeah, very great performance from Antonio Giovinazzi, and it's just a shame for him if he does not get, a drive next season, that he didn't do them more consistently. But Steve, let's talk about our last genuine race winner, Esteban Ocon, starting in P8 tomorrow. What do you expect to see from him? And, do you think this was where he needed to be today, or should he have been higher?
I think given the weekend so far, it sort of suggests that that's where we'd expect the Alpines to end up. It doesn't seem like a track that favours them. I think, was it Austria? In the practice sessions, they had blistering pace, and I remember sitting there going, "This is uncharacteristically fast for this team." But then obviously, come qualifying in the race, so they sort of fell back into their natural place. I think, having an Alfa Romeo ahead of them is a little bit strange, but as Owain highlighted out, I think Gio's he's been blessed with the fortune of the disastrous session for Williams. That's about where I'd expect him to be, especially at a circuit that he's not hugely experienced at. I did a bit of sleuthing before I jumped on for the recording, and I couldn't really find any info regarding any sort of races for him at Zandvoort. So I think it's a fairly new circuit for him. Considering how quickly he's picked it up, he's looked pretty comfortable for most of the weekend. Couple of little mistakes, but nothing too dramatic. And yeah, I wouldn't be too upset with that performance. I wouldn't want to see him go backwards. I think he's quite capable of holding his own. Owain mentioned it before. It will be quite. I expect it'll be quite tricky to overtake. So this will all come down to strategy, I imagine, and provided he's got the pace to stay ahead of Fernando and they don't do a cheeky swap or anything like that, then he could end up sort of 7th or 8th, because I don't expect a couple of players ahead of him to actually stay where they are.
Yeah, if I was Esteban Ocon, I'd be more concerned of the drivers that are out of position behind him than the ones that are ahead of him. But Tom, Fernando Alonso, certainly concerned with drivers behind him. He was holding up the pit lane for the last runs in Q3, but finished P9. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that was a bit cheeky. I'm not convinced that's completely within the spirit of the rules. Very narrow pit lane. You can't just go past people like in a lot of other pit lanes. So it was certainly a little bit on the cheeky side. Not quite as cheeky as Hungary '07, but certainly a little trick that he's obviously got in his arsenal there. I don't know whether he was trying to just make it so people couldn't finish their laps, or just trying to build a lap. I suspect it's more just trying to get a space to build a lap, but in the end, it hasn't helped. He was behind his teammate for the whole session, for the whole Q1, Q2, Q3. He just didn't have the pace that Ocon had in the end, which was surprising because at times at the weekend he looked like he was in the ascendancy. I don't know if that's that visor cam has taken away some of his special powers or something, but I don't know if he's got it on this weekend actually, to be fair, but it's it's a bit disappointing really. I expected a little bit more from him. I mean, to be fair, I'm talking about compared to his teammate here, because if you'd have said to me the Alpines would be 8th and 9th, I was convinced that this race was going to be that the four up front and the Aston Martins, and it was going to be a 2x2 top 10 with them, and Alpine would have been a sort of 11th, 12th, 13th around there. So from that perspective, Alpine can be fairly happy, but again, behind his teammate, I mean, he's only 200s behind his teammate, so that's not a disaster, I suppose. But yeah, a little bit on the disappointing side. But again, at least they're in there. You've got to be in the points to win the points, so they're certainly there in a position where they can potentially try and move forwards. They've got to look at getting ahead of that Alfa Romeo and then try and challenge the Ferraris ahead. So that's going to be their target. And yeah, they certainly seem to have a bit of pace this weekend, which is a little bit surprising, I thought. But yeah, no, should hopefully be good for Alpine.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of surprising pace, Daniel Ricciardo, the lead McLaren driver, finishing P10 in Q3, first out for first driver to come out in Q3 as well. Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, what do you make of his qualifying session?
I mean, he's out-qualified his teammate. It's not. I think it's quite a disappointing weekend for the McLarens. Maybe they can transform something in the race, but I don't really see it happening. But they were quite quick in Belgium, but then they're just kind of not. So they've been historically, bearing in mind that Norris is 4th in the championship, and I think still, hopefully, 2nd, 3rd. That one of the numbers, 3rd. Either way, they've been doing quite well, and they haven't really this weekend. I know Norris obviously got caught up in a load of stuff, but Ricciardo's not exactly been lighting up the timing screens really. And I think maybe going out first in Q3 was probably just to get some clean air, because it must be that they need all the help they can get. Really, they don't even want to look for a tow, especially around Zandvoort, which I think really does need. Even particularly with the wind that they have been having, obviously with it being so close to the sea, they just need that downforce as much as they can get, and they've not got it. So maybe it's just the sort of setup that they're running, or the way the McLaren is. It's a little bit odd. So we've been hearing. I don't know whether that will affect it particularly around this track, but it's just sort of uncharacteristically so. So I am surprised, but I don't think maybe for the reason you're intonating.
Yeah, I mean, he was certainly helped out by, the red flag at the end of Q2, solidifying his Q3 appearance, and that is one of the things that potentially stopped Lando Norris from, out qualifying his teammate. But as you say, very much off the pace this weekend, the McLarens. And Steve, a driver who was so close to Q3 again, but ended up causing his own red flag. George Russell, P11 currently. We obviously need to see if there is any, damage or whatever to that Williams gearbox. And hopefully, as a George Russell fan, nothing further will come from that, and a P11 start.
Yeah, a uncharacteristic mistake, which at first glance doesn't look too bad. But these innocuous oblique, impacts and that sort of thing can cause a bit of havoc. So, I think we just need to wait for the dust to settle and see if it does need like a gearbox change or anything like that. I can't see it happening, but like I said, I mean the impacts that don't look too dramatic are the ones that can be quite problematic. He got away with that seemingly pretty lightly though, so so we'll see. But up until that point, he was looking incredibly quick. He's looked very, very fast all weekend, actually. It just sort of, I wonder if it's an element of he knows that he's got something bigger coming up, like I don't know, like he's going into some sort of other project maybe, or
going back to Formula 2.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. It's almost like he's just got a bit of a second wind based on some future plans that are coming up that, we'll see. I mean, no one knows where he's going, but his just his pace, especially in qualifying, is just insane. That car doesn't deserve to be there, but he's putting it in places where it's. I mean, if we look back, just if I can quickly mention Spa, because I haven't had an opportunity to. What the hell was that? What on earth did we watch? It was like the early 90s again. I was confused. It just, yeah, I think if he ends up where everybody thinks he ends up, he's just going to be unbeatable. But for the here and now, that that car, we know that it's got some issues. It's not especially quick, and around a circuit like Zandvoort, where it's there's so many elevation changes and so many rapid direction changes and that sort of thing. It doesn't favor a car like the Williams, which is quite cumbersome compared to the other cars on a lot of the other cars on the grid. But he just makes it do things that it shouldn't be able to do. So 11th is pretty good. I reckon he could actually be quite annoying to Ricciardo, the Alpines. Maybe Gio, I don't know if he'll stay there or not. I expect he'd start going backwards, which it's all the more incentive for George to basically just put his foot down and see what he can do. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's harassing a McLaren and a couple of Alpines, by sort of lap 10, 15. He's definitely got the pace, and in the long runs that he was looking pretty good as well, and in the very short long runs that they managed to do for the weekend.
Yeah, a lot of impacts to practice time this weekend so far, which should give us a very spicy race weekend, touch wood. But yeah, Tom, Lance Stroll, P12 in the Aston Martins. We were going into this thinking that we were going to get something potentially special special in inverted commas from the Aston Martins. But, one was blocked by two Haas cars, but the other one just didn't have the pace to get into Q3 today.
Yeah, a bit surprising, but also slightly unsurprising in the fact that this is a real driver circuit. And with the greatest respect to Lance Stroll, who has become a very decent mid-grid driver, when it comes to the big driving circuits, unless it's wet, he tends to struggle. It's the point at squirt circuits where he seems to be able to excel himself. So I'm both surprised and not surprised in that sense. I think to be out-qualified by a Williams, and again, with the greatest respect to Daniel Ricciardo, the way he's driving at the moment, I think he would have hoped to have been ahead of Ricciardo, and then Giovinazzi as well to be ahead. It's just a kick in the teeth as well. Aston Martin as a whole are going to be very disappointed with their qualifying session. They definitely had the car to be in the top 10 with both cars, and now they're having to start. At least they get free tyre choice. That is one thing, which on this track is probably going to be quite crucial. They've been pretty good this season for Aston Martin for their strategy calls. So you might see them potentially starting on the hards and going long, or even starting on the softs and just going for it and then making an early pit stop if there's a safety car onto the hards. So as long as they're kind of they're reacting quickly to what's happening around them, we could see them move forwards a little bit in the race. But I think Lance is going to be he's going to have to worry about Norris behind him, because that car is not that McLaren is not a 13th place car. So we got to see him go through turn 1 first. So it may well change when we come down to turn 1 and turn 3 especially as well. I think as well he may well have been missed out by the change in track conditions. The track, because of the limited running all day, was rubbering in constantly throughout the session. It was getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and it was always going to be last car across the line was going to be was going to be in a good position. And obviously with the red flags in the session as well, which the first one was, I can't believe they gave a red flag for that after a couple of seconds. The dust hadn't even settled. But that's definitely impacted on him as well. So Aston Martin have got to react quickly in this race, because their fight in the Constructors' Championship is so tight at the moment. With them and Alpine, it's only about, I'm just checking now myself, 8 points between AlphaTauri and Alpine and Aston Martin on 53. They should be a lot higher. They should be a lot closer to AlphaTauri than where they are. They've definitely got as good a car as AlphaTauri and Alpine, so they need to be moving forwards in the race. They need to be putting pressure on them, because they've got a car to finish 5th in the championship, and at the moment looks like they're probably going to end up finishing 7th, because Lance Stroll needs to put in the performances, and Sebastian Vettel needs to be more consistent, to be honest. So I mean, hopefully they can move forwards. I can see Vettel moving forwards. I mean, he's got a Red Bull in front of him, so if he can just kind of hang on to the back of him and go through the traffic, then he should be able to move forwards. But Lance Stroll he needs to get points. He needs to push into there and get his usual 10th, 9th place. That's going to be his minimum for the race, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of tyres as well, it is worth mentioning, I think, that we've got the hardest Pirelli range, the hardest 3 of the Pirelli range, and marbles have still been sighted on the edge of tracks in the long run. So it's going to be an interesting race on Deg, perhaps, as well tomorrow. So yeah, definitely one to watch out for strategy-wise, as we've mentioned several times. And Owain, Lando Norris, P13. Tom just said that's not a P13 McLaren, but we have mentioned that the McLarens have been sort of off the pace this weekend a little bit. So, do you see him pushing into the higher ends of the points that we are used to seeing Lando Norris in? Or, do you think, maybe P8, P9 is where they're setting their expectations?
I think P8, P9 is probably the ceiling past a certain point. Particularly, it's not easy to pass, and I think it's only going to get harder over the course of the race. You mentioned the marbles, obviously, even with the hard tyres that Pirelli have brought. With what we've been seeing, where turn 3, particularly places like that, if you get a little bit offline, if you brake a little bit too like that, you're in the wall. I think it's going to get increasingly more treacherous in some of the corners to even affect a pass whatsoever. And you running off what it will be the racing line is going to get harder and harder to do. I think Norris will have it will definitely get by a couple of people, but I don't think Russell is going to be so easy to get past. Russell, even in that Williams, as we keep saying, he's just so quick, and he kind of has that confidence. And I don't. He's not the sort of one to. He'll give space, but he's not exactly going to give the place away. I think Stroll is probably a bit weaker, but I don't see him getting particularly high up, because I don't see a lot of cars falling backwards for him to sort of eat up, as it were. So I think it's just one of those things of that the McLaren just isn't really fast enough, and then they've not got the setup right, or they can't get the car to work around here. And unfortunately, he's taken the more of the brunt of it. Ricciardo looks okay up in 10th in comparison, but Norris isn't particularly great. I think he might have been affected by the red flag, Norris. So that's probably why he's kept him down there, because I remember him being on a faster lap, but I might be wrong. But it's still not really good enough, 13th, because he should be getting there on the first lap rather than having to do a second.
Yeah, it's all about getting in those banker laps, and we did see how important they were today in Q2. So, yeah. Steve, onto the other Williams. We're just coming back to you for the Williams today, but Nicholas Latifi, if he'd managed to set the same time that he did in Q1, would have finally managed to out-qualify George Russell in that Williams. But sadly, he also then crashed out after his teammate did. So, P14 for him today, and based off the Williams performance of the season, potentially dropping backwards tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I think based off its appearance after Q2 as well, it might be dropping down the grid before they even get going as well, depending on the level of damage. Yeah, it's Nick Latifi. He's reliable, not massively exciting, but he is slowly but steadily developing as a driver. I think it's looking like he will be numero uno at Williams next year. Or well, I mean, you'd like to think so anyway. I think it's I hope it's confidence building for him that Jos Capito is has made it very clear that they want to keep him around. So I just hope he capitalizes on these opportunities that he's had, like at Hungary and that sort of thing, where Williams had their first double points finish in years. Obviously, tomorrow is going to be a wee bit tricky for him being in 14th, and I expect that to drop even further. I think he's done quite a bit of damage to that car, but he'll be amongst competitors that he can easily get the upper hand on. I mean, Tsunoda's obviously we'll get to him, but there's the two Haas, there's an Alfa Romeo, driven by a reserve driver as well. There's Seb, who could go pretty far up the grid pretty quickly, or he could stay there. As Tom pointed out before, consistency is a bit of an issue. So I think Latifi's biggest issue is, not knowing quite where he's actually going to be starting the race from tomorrow. And if it is from 14th, then it's not too bad. I mean, he's got Norris ahead of him. He's going to be very, very hard to pass. It's going to be hard to pass anyway. But Tom mentioned before as well, for Seb, he can latch on to the back of Perez. I mean, there's no reason why Nick can't do that with Lando either, and just basically, coattail his way up the grid if it works out that way. But it's another Nick Latifi, 3/4 of the way down the grid, but he has had some pretty remarkable performances on Sunday where it counts. So hopefully he does well. If not, then there's always Monza.
Always Monza, and Williams have historically done relatively well around Monza. As to whether present day Williams will do very well around Monza, we'll get to find out. But still, Tom, on to a probably not very surprising performance from Yuki Tsunoda to finish P15 in Q2. Were you expecting anything more from him, or is the spark that Yuki Tsunoda provided in the preseason very much, vanished at this point?
Let's just put my tongue firmly in my cheek here. Phenomenal qualifying session there from him. He beat the best car, a 4-time world champion, a race winner, and a Schumacher. No, it's not good. A second off his teammate's best time in the end. He's only had 5 points finishes in a car that is in that fight. Is in that fight for the 5th best car. So he should be. Realistically, he should be 10th place. It should be his starting point. Before any retirements, that's what he should be looking at. I think his place is safe for next season. I don't think you've got some other drivers in the Red Bull Junior program coming through, but I don't think any of them are quite ready yet to jump into Formula One. So I think he's got another year. And let's just say Honda still being involved is probably is definitely helping him in that sense as well. But he's not there just because of that. He is a quick driver. If you look at his performances in Formula 2, if you just took feature races, which, to be fair, I do in Formula 2, I only really count the feature races. His qualifying and his feature race performances were among the best in the season, and he probably would have won the championship. In fact, I think he would have won the championship if it was just feature races and qualifying. So he's definitely a talent. He's a quick driver. He's just not taken to Formula 1 at the moment. He's just not even in the same league as Pierre Gasly. I mean, there was very little between them in Q1, to be honest, and I think he's probably a victim of the traffic as well. I mean, I know he got into Q2, but it's just not really good enough. I mean, to be a second off your teammate's best time. I know Gasly had a couple of extra laps than he did because he was in Q3, but even so, it's not there. I think he's just got to he's got to just keep his head down, have some clean races, benefit, show some racecraft, benefit from some luck between now and the end of the season, and he's got to reset and go again next season, because it's just not good enough at the moment. But as I said, I'm pretty sure Red Bull have got no other option at the moment, so they'll stick with him. But they do need to look out, because the threat of Alex Albon coming back into that team, if he comes into Williams next year, which I know is widely suspected, then if he outperforms Latifi, then I can see Red Bull plugging Albon back into that car in a second. So it's definitely something he needs to watch out for. So safe for the moment, but he certainly can't rest on his laurels. He needs to improve.
Yeah, I was about to say that there are some alumni members of the Red Bull Junior Driving Program who would be happy to take that seat back, Alex Albon being one of them. But, he's currently being touted at Williams, which is interesting, but I guess that's the tie backing. Owain, Sergio Perez, P16, very disappointing, and just I've seen a lot of people laying the blame on him of just not getting that lap in when he needed it.
Yeah, I don't think it's entirely his fault in some ways, but the track was rubbering in very, very quickly. We're seeing times rapidly improve, and but then obviously it just kind of fell apart. The problem is he's really put the Red Bull at a serious disadvantage, which is not something they employed him for. They employed him because he's he doesn't, he would be fast enough to get them into the top, but then consistent enough in the race to actually sort of have an alternate challenge. It just kind of, the run just wasn't great. It's obviously not a Max Verstappen, but I don't know. He just kind of, it's just not been amazing. I think it's the easiest way to put it. I can't really remember why he wasn't quick, but I think he just didn't get the right side of the track evolution. I think his run was probably a little bit too early to where it needed to be to actually take advantage of it, getting faster and faster. And he just ended up the wrong side of it. So you could almost lay some blame at the pit wall there, but beyond that, it's just not a good performance, and it needs to be better. I'm sure it will be, but he'll fix it very, very quickly, I imagine. But it's there's nothing he can do about it now. He just has to hope that he can really, really make a move on in the race.
Yeah, and there is only half a second between P1 and P16 in Q1, but even so, that's your teammate that you're the half a second behind in what is supposedly an identical car. So that's not that there's an element of situation, as we said, track times and race evolution and track evolution, but at the end of the day, that's half a second that Sergio Perez should theoretically be able to make up, but sadly not. Steve, Sebastian Vettel P17 will be furious with the two Russian flagged cars that have been driving around all season, but I don't know if there's been any decisions made yet from the stewards, but they were summoned to the stewards. But P17 for Sebastian Vettel is not where he wanted to be this weekend.
Yeah, I think even with that incident, it hasn't worked out for either of the Aston Martins. So without that incident, I don't think he would have been much further up the grid than he was. His best time was 1:10.731, which is, it's on pace. That's still slower than the likes of Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, George Russell, so on and so forth. There's not really much to look at and say, well, if that didn't happen, he'd be 5 or 6 places further up than where he is. What happened is with Mazepin pulling out on him like that. I would, and I'm not saying this because I can't stand the guy, but I would lay the vast majority of the blame at Mazepin. It's his responsibility to make sure that it's his and also his engineer's responsibility to make sure that the track is actually clear behind them before he goes and does anything like, overtaking his teammate to get the jump on him for a final run in qualifying.
I've got some news for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Hot off the press, no further action for both Mazepin and Schumacher because it was not unnecessary impeding, as Vettel himself said there were too many cars in one place. No further action for wrecking the lap of Sebastian Vettel completely unnecessarily.
That's
a joke.
Yeah, that's
a fucking joke.
That's pathetic. Yeah, we could have an episode on questionable stewarding decisions, I think.
Like last race weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with that sort of unpleasant decision aside, Seb's been on the back foot for most of the weekend. Obviously, FP1 was ruined by his car lunching itself, and he's not looked overly comfortable for the majority of the weekends. I think that applies to both Aston Martins. I just don't think they've gotten their cars in either of the cars, in a functional operating window where it actually gets the tires to work properly, and this is an issue that Mercedes have had this year as well with their low rake design. So I think it's symptomatic of the fact that they are one of the only low rake, long wheelbase design cars on a circuit that naturally is going to favor these shorter wheelbase, high rake cars that change direction just faster. The fact that Mercedes are where they are is because it's Mercedes. They will find other ways to make it work, whereas I don't think Aston Martin quite have that tenacity or resourceful nature yet. They're still a fairly young team when you consider what they've come from and where they were a couple of years ago when they were almost bankrupt under Racing Point. Under Force India. So it's growing pains, but it doesn't really help the here and now when you've got a 4 times world champion qualifying in 17th, and then an accomplished driver in Lance Stroll as well in 12th. I mean, he's not slow, he's not remarkable, but he is a good midfield performer. Neither of those cars are where they should be, but Seb should be especially frustrated with that, and I just hope it doesn't turn into Seb frustrated level decisions on track tomorrow, because we know what happens when Seb gets frustrated.
Yeah, we certainly do. So Tom, let's move on to your favorite team of them all, Alfa Romeo, but a different driver in this weekend after being deputized for Kimi Räikkönen, who sadly tested positive for COVID, sadly being a word that some of us would use. Robert Kubica has been drafted in, and to be ahead of the 2 Haas cars is impressive when you consider the context that he's had to put that car in. Wouldn't you say so, Tom?
Absolutely, and as well, I think the future's now bright for my punditry with regards to Alfa Romeo, with the possibility of a pass this past grumpy Finn going there. Oh wait, no, genuinely with Bottas going there potentially, and the possibilities of Nick de Vries going there to replace Antonio Giovinazzi, or even Giovinazzi alongside Bottas, I would actually be a lot more willing to kind of give the time of day to the Alfa Romeo team, and this weekend as well, with Giovinazzi qualifying 7th and Robert Kubica coming into that car completely cold, hasn't driven it. I mean, at least he's driven the car before, but hasn't driven in a Formula One session for quite a while on a track that the team would have no data of, that he wouldn't have driven certainly since his junior Formula days. It's a phenomenal performance. It really is. And considering as well that we all thought that he was absolutely trash after his season at Williams, his comeback season, and George Russell defeating him just so comfortably. That's before we all knew how good George Russell was. But still, to beat the Hasses, he didn't get below the 111s, so he's a good half second off. But he still about second off his teammates' time. That's pretty good. I mean, you look at when Paul di Resta came into a pretty decent Williams, and Paul di Resta is no slouch. He's a quality driver. He's fit. He's young, and he's fully able-bodied as well, which we all know Robert Kubica isn't quite. So the fact that he put it on the back of the grid in a Williams, and they said, "Oh, that's the best he could really do," and Robert Kubica with just an hour in that car, not even an hour because it was a red flag, with like half an hour's running in that car, has been able to put it ahead of the Hasses and within sort of 3/4 of a second of his teammate. It's pretty damn good, to be honest. So yeah, I'm fully impressed with that performance. He's about second off the pace when he was 2.5-3 seconds off the pace in practice 3. So solid result for him. I can't think for 1 second he's going to be getting points, but I mean that the responsibility of points for Alfa Romeo seems to rest purely on Antonio Giovinazzi, which is a comment which sends shudders down my spine. But it's certainly he's certainly proved that he has still got something to offer motor racing anyway. Not that we ever doubted it, because he was a quality driver in the past. So I'm just really glad for him, to be honest. I just didn't want him to be behind the Hasses 2-3 seconds off the pace. So the fact he's there, if he can, kind of the race can come to him and he can just move forward a little bit, won't get points, but if he can just have a decent race, have a couple of battles with someone, probably still finish ahead of Tsunoda, that would be a result for him. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about Alfa Romeo this week, put it that way.
Wow, words I never thought I would hear come out of your mouth. Owain, Mick Schumacher, we've just obviously mentioned the hot off the press news that no further action from either of the Hasses, so we don't need to talk about that. But what was going on at the end of that, Q1 session? Obviously, we knew that traffic was going to be a problem, but from both Hasses blocking the entire track at the same time.
I haven't seen unfortunately, I've not seen the replays. I've seen obviously the movement of Mazepin and Schumacher in that area. I don't know who was fighting for track position to get ahead of who or what, to be honest, but it's just a mess, really. And I think the FIA really should have seen it coming, with just the layout of the track. And it's very, they didn't put the provisions that they did in Austria or Styria. I can't remember. Probably one, but probably both.
Aren't they the same place?
Both different qualified sessions. I don't know whether there was queuing up in one or the other. They should have seen it coming. I think, bearing in mind, the start of the lap being so critical. Just with the way obviously the banking is, you carry a lot of momentum off of it, and it's not like Hungary where you can almost start from a standing start, really, and not have too much of an issue. So I think it's almost the FIA's fault a little bit, which may have affected the way that this decision has gone. But it is silly, and I don't see why the provisions weren't made, because it's obviously caused an issue for Sebastian Vettel. I think the Hasses are very, very lucky to get off scot-free. I think part of it is probably that they're not, you can't penalise them any further back. I think there's some of that, and it doesn't help Vettel if they're, they've got a 5-place grid penalty, but they're both back there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I think it's just a bit kind of messy, the way that's played out, and it's ruined Vettel's lap, and there's going to be no punishment, really, bearing in mind what I've just said. So I don't know what's going on with it. I think going forward, I'd like to end it on a positive note. I think the best the Haas can do is stay out of the gravel trap at turn 11.
I mean, one of those Hasses might accomplish that. I'm not so sure about the second one. But just to further go on what you were saying about, how can you punish the Haas even further? They are already racing in 2020 based on their current car. So, they're already a season behind. But Steve, let's talk about everyone's least favorite driver in Formula One. Nikita has a spin. Is he going to have a spin tomorrow? What do you reckon? Place your bets.
Probably. I don't really care, to be honest, as long as he doesn't take anyone else out on the way. I think we're all very aware of why he's in that team, why he's still got to drive, and the fact that that is still a thing is probably for an entirely separate episode. We might have to queue up some hour-long gripes about various things in the current state of Formula One. But Yeah, I mean, today's a perfect example of why that sort of driver doesn't belong at this level of motorsport. He can drive, I will admit. I mean, I can't do the things that he can. I mean, that's I'll be very, very honest and say that he would absolutely demolish me and a bunch of other people around the racetrack. But Formula One is the pinnacle of you could consider it the pinnacle of motorsport. It's certainly the pinnacle of open wheel racing, which is, as we all know, incredibly dangerous. And he just has very little disregard for his colleagues who he has to share a racetrack with and has to respect the space that is that they all have to work with. They all use the same bits of track, and it's just I think it's something that we've mentioned before on the podcast. Is it's just a matter of time before he causes a hideous accident and either hurts or kills himself or someone else. And that's not a conversation I want to have. So it's either a case of he improves his situational awareness and his willingness to actually work with other drivers. And because I don't believe he's either willing or capable of doing that, Haas need to find a different driver, but they won't, because he also funds that, or sorry, his dad funds the team. So yeah, I'm afraid we're probably stuck with him for another year or two at least. But yeah, I just hope he keeps his nose clean and doesn't get in the way. And if he does come off, it's not a major incident, and he's not hurt or killed or putting others at risk or anything like that. Because it's just, I wouldn't wish harm upon anybody, even him. I don't like the guy, but at the end of the day, what we saw in qualifying is the exact reason why he just doesn't belong in Formula One. And I'll take that to the grave. If anybody wants to throw rocks at me over not wanting him in the sport, you are more than welcome to. That's your opinion. I have mine, and that's how these things work.
Yeah. So after going through all 20 drivers, let's have a look at our top 3 predictions for tomorrow. So, Owain, you've already said that you think Max Verstappen, is going to keep a hold of that top P1 position. But, are you going to stick with that? And who else is occupying the podium for you?
No, I'm going to give it a Verstappen, Hamilton, and then Gasly. I think that's going to go down that way.
You're expecting Bottas to just drop off?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fair assumption. That has happened a lot this season.
I like how there was absolutely no hesitation there either. Just, yep.
Yeah. All right, Steve, your top 3 prediction, please.
Mine was actually honestly the same as Owain's, but just to be different, I'd be quite happy to see Carlos Sainz just sort of sneak in a cheeky third. I think Max will nail it. He's just been that car's been on rails all weekend. Lewis has obviously found something, so I'd expect him to stay where he is or thereabouts. And yeah, with potential shenanigans, Valtteri deciding to, go visit the beach with a couple of other cars in tow, maybe at T1 on lap 1. I don't know. But yeah, like a third place for Carlos Sainz would make me pretty happy. So that'll be my top 3.
Yeah, I think after everything that Carlos has been through this weekend, him finishing it in P3, that would be just, the perfect way to end the weekend. But Tom, your top 3, please.
I think I'm going to shock a lot of you here with my top 3. I am going for a Valtteri Bottas win with Verstappen second and Hamilton third. And I think Mercedes are going to try and manoeuvre their pawn to try and get their king into a good position, and then the king's going to be taken out by the queen that is Max Verstappen. I just think they're gonna try and manoeuvre Bottas into a position that's going to help Hamilton, and as a result, Red Bull are going to use Verstappen to cover him. So, they're going to cover Hamilton, and then Bottas is going to kind of stumble into a win. It is a little bit bold, I know, but I just got this feeling that this might be a bit of a redemption time for Valtteri. So yeah, Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton.
Yeah, mine also follows a similar pattern of thought to that. However, I think Mercedes, will at least get Hamilton ahead of Verstappen. That's what I'm hoping for at least. So Bottas, Hamilton, Verstappen. But like you say, it all depends on whether, Bottas can actually pull it off or not. And, it might be a little bit bold, but let's go for some bold predictions now. So Owain, your bold prediction, please.
Right, I'm predicting that Kubica is going to somehow make it into first based on no experience whatsoever, no experience at this track whatsoever, in a team that hasn't come here before. And then his car's going to fail on 3 minutes to the end.
Oh, don't. Don't.
That'll happen. There we go.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I was almost in tears for the poor guy. That's just mean. Don't do it. Don't do it to him twice.
I predicted it. There we go. It's been said.
That would be.
What's the last 3 minutes of Le Mans if you don't get that one?
It's heartbreaking to watch. Oh dear.
Steve, your bold prediction, please. Is it as heartbreaking?
Depends if you're Spa as a ticket as a ticket holder or not, but I don't think we'll get full race distance tomorrow. I think based on the number of red flag incidents, I think it'll be significantly delayed to the point where we won't get full race distance.
I guess it depends on whether the FIA actually tell teams as to whether the clock started.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. But Spa shenanigans and weird decisions aside, this track is very, very unforgiving. So I think we'll see at least one red flag, but I think we'll see enough red flags and delays and marshals not fully clued up on how to use fire extinguishers properly to see the race end sort of before it should.
We did certainly have our fair share of red flags today, and I guess that could sort of back it up. But Tom, your bold prediction, please. I've been waiting for this since you mentioned it in the stream chat.
You're all going to die. I predict Antonio Giovinazzi is going to be the highest finishing Ferrari engine. And I genuinely think it could happen. So yeah, a positive prediction for an Alfa Romeo. You heard it here first.
Wow. Just wow.
I was going to say, has Antonio Giovinazzi's manager got in touch with you somehow to just lay some...
No, I've been given a cease and desist order from Alfa Romeo, so I'm making up for lost time.
I see.
Is Antonio Giovinazzi's manager now Raikkonen's old manager?
Yeah.
The best manager in Formula One.
I'm just waiting for Fred Vassir's head to pop in stage left behind your green screen.
That would be kind of hilarious. My bold prediction is going to revolve around not necessarily the actual race result, but I think Red Bull might stick a new engine in that Red Bull of Sergio Perez before the race. Because, we've said there's potential for, lack of overtakes, and Red Bull are very much in need of getting some new engine components in at least one of their cars. So why not throw away a race when he's already had a run of pointless races anyway? So, yeah.
That's a good shout. Good shout.
Change from Red Bull. Yeah. And finally, as well, just a star of qualifying. Owain, who was your star of qualifying?
I didn't know we did this now. What?
We've always done this. I just tend to forget about it a lot of the time because it's not actually in my script.
That'll be why. I think it's got to be Giovinazzi for 7th.
I mean, that's a fair one, given the starter, F1 Jesus, as he's been dubbed. Steve, your star of qualifying, please.
Gasly.
Yeah.
I mean, understandable. Tom?
Do you know what? I think, I've got to go for somebody different. I think I'm going to go Robert Kubica. It's a bit unfair to not say Max Verstappen after his lap and to not say Hamilton, given how close he got to that, despite Verstappen's DRS issue. But I think I'm going to go with Robert Kubica.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to go with I was about to say Nikita Mazepin as a joke, but I couldn't even finish the sentence without gagging. So
Did you throw up into your mouth a little bit
yeah,
there?
Antonio Giovinazzi can be my star of qualifying because, putting an Alfa Romeo there from him, nah. But he's been really good all weekend, so, got to give him something. So that is the show, and Grid Talk is available on Amazon as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. We have a Reddit. You can search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk. And we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. You can also get your hands on some official Grid Talk merchandise at gridtalk.com. No, gridtalk.shop. Why don't websites have .com or .co.uk anymore? Anyway, make sure that you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. And just before we go, an opportunity to promo. So, Owain, if people want to go and find you, you post articles and stuff, give yourself a bit of a, shout out.
I have to admit, I've been slacking as of late. But if you want to read some of my older stuff, you can read it over on spotlightpro.com.
Spotlightpro.com, absolutely. And Steve, give us a bit of a pitch about Formula Shakedown. You've got a podcast now as well.
We've got a podcast, yes. We've recorded 2. So the first one is out of the oven, has rested for a while, and is now fit for human consumption. You can listen to it on Formula Shakedown, which is our Facebook group. So just look up Formula Shakedown. And the second one was recorded yesterday morning. And that should be out fairly shortly. It focuses on open wheel racing, so F1, Indy, F2, F3, Super Formula, S5000, that sort of thing. But if I get my way, we'll have another for GTs and prototypes and that sort of thing as well. So you can find it on there, and I think we are working on getting it launched on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, so on and so forth, the usual suspects anyway. But come find us on Facebook and have a listen.
Yeah, absolutely do. And Tom, anyone watching this will know that you've been visually promoting your own podcast for a long time, but give us a pitch about Monkeyseat Podcast.
I just want to listen to Formula Shakedown. That sounds awesome. I'll definitely subscribe to that. Yeah, that sounds cool. You've got a new subscriber now. No, we're at the Monkey Seats at Monkeyseat Pod on the socials, monkeyseatpod.com. We like Formula Shakedown. We cover top line motorsport, open wheel racing, not so much Super Formula or anything like that, but it's more focuses on Formula One as a main, and then as a kind of a support act, we've got IndyCar, Formula E, and the support series as well. We touch on as well. We get Ian Davis on from Veloce Motorsports after each Extreme E race. The one exception to the open wheel rule, we do follow Extreme E as well because it's just cool. So yeah, come and give us a listen.
Yeah, and if you want to hear anything else from me, I do have a YouTube channel, just Ruby Price. You'll find me, trust me. And on that note, we will be back tomorrow to review the race results from the first Dutch Grand Prix since 1985. And we hope you enjoy it. So, thanks very much for listening. We'll still be on YouTube for a bit to answer any questions that you've got. But other than that, thank you very much and goodbye. All right, before I scroll through and actually look at what people have been sent, other than Steve, who we've obviously got, a live response from, what the fuck is that lack of penalty?
That's just mental. Did you hear his interview in the Pen afterwards?
Which one?
Mazepin with Sky.
Something about how they were supposed to be in a swap.
Yeah, apparently
or something.
He was supposed to be ahead of Schumacher on track, and Schumacher went past him. So as usual, Mazepin in the final sector decided he was going to take matters into his own hand and went to overtake him right in the way of Vettel. And he's blaming Schumacher and the team. So yeah, it's shocking. I can't believe that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's difficult to say for definite which Haas driver was at fault, but one of them's got to get a penalty, if not both of them, because it was dangerous. I mean, what about? It reminds me of the time. Was it Alonso or was it even Vettel that had to dive out of the way of a slow car on the straight before? in a race recently. I remember literally having to just completely dive out the throttle. But yeah, it was really dangerous. I can't believe that they're not doing anything for that. Not even a reprimand. It's just mental.
Yeah, it seems as though like part of the justification for it is because there was that many cars ahead, which in this case is 6, including the 2 Hasses. The Vettel would have presumably had to stop anyway. But that's weird
not
because
a reason
I know,
or an
no.
excuse.
That's such an odd precedent to set. Like,
Yeah.
if they're not going to penalise anyone because there's just too much going on track, then quite clearly they need to redefine the way that penalties are handed out, or the way that sort of thing is actually looked at. Because if that sort of thing just goes unpunished, it just keeps happening. It's
punish the all 6 of them.
Yeah.
It's like, stop going unnecessarily slowly.
We do keep hearing from Michael Massey that penalties are supposed to be applied, outside of the context of the incident. No, just specifically in the context of the incident. So it doesn't, if you throw another driver into the wall, you're punished for like the collision that caused that. But that's not part of the reasoning for the penalty. Because Sebastian Vettel was presumably going to have to stop at some point, isn't reason for a lack of penalty. Because he still had to stop anyway.
He shouldn't have had to stop. Like, the idea, they're meant to be out of the way. He's on a push lap. They should all be out the way in an ideal world. So if they're not out the way, punish all of them.
Yeah, but this is where that minimum lap delta for
a good idea.
Warm-up laps and that sort of thing needs to actually just happen, because it solves the problem. Or it largely solves the problem. You'll still get cars in the way, but you won't get closure rates of 250 kilometers an hour, because it's just, that is going to end up in a hideous accident. It's not hard to imagine. In fact, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. But oh god,
yeah,
I just it's frustrating. It pisses me off, and it won't change, because obviously the stewards and race direction are obviously finding it too difficult to determine who's at fault. But there is fault there. They just obviously need to look at it more closely, rather than just going, oh, there's 6 cars there, we can't be bothered, it's too hard basket, because that's the attitude that they appear to have.
Yeah, pretty much.
I've come up with a name for the Grid Talk, issues we have with Formula One podcast.
Go on.
Gripe Talk.
Gripe Talk.
Yeah, F1 Gripe Talk. There we go.
F1 Gripe Talk.
I mean, it would certainly last longer than the supposed race that we had at Spa last weekend.
Yeah. God, I could talk for 5 hours about things I don't like about Formula One.
Yeah.
But that means that that means that you're not a fan, Owen, because you're not allowed to criticize things that you enjoy. Apparently,
I guess, yeah. Guess I'll just cancel the Sky subscription now. Got no need for it. I'm not a fan.
So to scroll back through the chat, then, lots of praise for Zandvoort as a track. Connor Walker, absolutely brilliant. I hope they race here every year. I also hope they race here every year. I mean, we're yet to see the race, but as far as driving on the circuit goes, it does look, edge of the seat.
You know what it reminds me of? When I was younger, this is going back a very long time ago. It's those Hot Wheels car track set things where you push down on a thing and it launches a car through a big loop, and then it goes, or turn 3 especially just reminds me of that. It just looks insane. It looks physics breaking. It's mad. I love it.
It's the high line that does me.
Yeah.
Once I saw that through practice, I was just like, I'll try recreating that on the game. Impossible. Physically impossible. No, I don't believe it. I don't believe they're going that quickly round that corner in that way.
It's oh gosh. I'm kind of hoping to see what happens if somebody just tries to send it up the inside.
It didn't happen in the F3 race I saw earlier.
I haven't watched that yet, but
well, no. I mean, like, there were attempts, but it doesn't really work.
Doesn't work. Okay, fair.
Maybe you just need someone with a suitably large, actually no, small set of risk assessment abilities.
No, not him.
No.
I'm confused.
Me too.
Right, you just got to break later than the other guy.
I mean, breaking late going into T3 is what's caused several red flags this weekend.
I don't want to know what's going to happen if someone goes in there and gets it wrong, because I can just imagine cars going up. It'll look like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater rather than a Formula One race.
Oh god.
Responses to the penalty in the chat. Tom Downey, complete cop out by the FIA. Vettel could have smashed into Mazepin and potentially had a horrific accident. George saying it should have been a penalty for the Haas drivers, probably both of them. Grid penalty and license points. 3 for Mazepin, 1 for Schumacher. Mazepin's attitude after the interview, unsurprisingly, stunk as well.
Vettel, I think, has done an amazing job keeping the car relatively controlled and not plowing into the rear of both of them. Like, and then I imagine you've got a flying, you've then got a flying Aston Martin, which could potentially go into the car that was in front of the two of them.
I thought the Red Bull was supposed to give you wings.
Hey, nice.
No, it's the Aston Martin wings.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a Bond car. It flies, so it's fine.
What Bond movies have you been watching?
So I don't know.
If you take the banking too fast, it could go underwater.
There we go.
Isn't there a beach?
Yeah. Wait, are we suddenly bringing Lotus back now? I'm all for that, by the way.
Depends if we get like the random, Caterham Lotus that we got now. But if we get, like the Lotus Renault that we got with, Kimi's, one and only win for the team, that was good. I think it.
So you mean we can't bring back the Caterham with the really elegant nose section on it from 2014?
No, I mean I'm all for bringing back catering, but not Caterham.
Okay, fair.
I'm here.
I thought catering was the issue that stopped McLaren from being good in about 2010, 2011. That's a highly specific joke.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Ron Dennis is pushing to literally every single industry possible. Yeah.
Oh dear. No, I can't believe that penalty though. That's
What penalty?
Well, no, sorry, that decision, I should say. Yeah, no, you're spot on. I don't know how you fix this. It's not the first time we've had on-track incidents just go, largely unpunished. But yeah, it's either that or this just keeps happening and it ends up in a huge mess. And then they'll turn around and say, "Oh, we're reviewing our rules into the regulations into." Whatever they need to look into. But by then it's far too late. I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the last we hear of it. Would I be correct in assuming Aston Martin can appeal the steward's decision to not issue a penalty to either of the two of them?
I think they can. I think they can appeal, the application of the rule, but
because they've got the right to review, don't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure they can actually appeal the decision per se, but I think they can. I don't think they can get Mazepin a penalty. Put it that way.
Yeah, I certainly.
What do they even gain by that? Like, that's the problem. I think a lot of it.
No, it's not to issue a penalty because I mean, as Ruby pointed out, like, what do you do with them? You can't demote them positions down the grid. They're already at the back. But it there needs to be some sort of trigger point to get them to look at it again and actually, make them realize, right, this can't happen because it's nearly caused a serious accident that could have hurt multiple people. So clearly we need to do something about it, because that's the rationale of that annoys me more than the fact that nothing's been done about it. Just like, oh, there were too many cars on track. I'm like, so what? They've got all the telemetry and all the data they could possibly need access to. They can see where the cars are at each given, moments, and each session, where they are relative to each other and so on. It can't be that hard to figure out who's, started this backlog of cars. So, nah, it doesn't sit well with me at all. I think it needs to be looked at again. It probably won't, and it'll just carry on happening.
Yeah, I mean, the F1 official Twitter account has just posted a video of it, like of the onboard and off-board as well. And it does look like, that could have been something potentially horrendous. But a comment about Sebastian Vettel from Tojo Tony: what are your opinions about the recent rumors surrounding Vettel's seat? I wasn't aware that there were any rumors, but someone
neither.
else.
I thought he was on quite a long-year deal. Am I wrong?
I mean, I remember he bought shares in Aston Martin when he joined the team, so
Yeah, I don't think they're based in any reality. I don't think there is any risk for that seat. I mean, if Aston Martin did come across the driver they did want to sign, then it would be Vettel they would replace because Stroll. But still, I don't think there's any danger of that happening. Not next year anyway. They'd have to give it at least 1 year with the new regulations before they made a decision like that.
We can't let silly season.
We can't let good results get in the way of nepotism after all. So. Sorry, Lance. No, I'm not. No, I've not heard anything about Seb. Something to bear in mind to whoever asked. Thank you for your question. It's the silly season does produce a lot of just like vapor sort of rumors as well. So the ones that typically persist are usually the ones that end up, becoming largely true. Like the world's worst kept secret at the moment is George Russell going to Mercedes.
George Russell's going to Mercedes. That's the first I've heard of that.
You may be shocked. Tom looks confused.
Next, you'll be telling me that Raikkonen's retiring.
That'll never happen.
I fully believe Raikkonen's going to go and do something else for a year, and then he's going to go into Ferrari's Le Mans program.
Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, to be honest with you.
That's a Raikkonen thing. That seems like he'd be up for that.
He can go join Giancarlo Fisichella in the Sky Italia Ferrari in GT World Challenge, and circulate in the back of the Pro-Am category. But the rumors that typically persist or hang around without much variation are usually the ones that pan out. But a lot of the the Seb one, for example, purely come around from the winter break, or the summer break, or whatever, depending on what part of the world you're in, where there's not much news happening. So stuff just sort of gets cooked up based on contextual information and that sort of thing, which isn't fully considered. But as Tom mentioned before, if Aston Martin were to get rid of one of their drivers, it would be Seb because, nepotism.
I mean, Connor Walker has handily said in the chat that apparently they approached Alonso, but he doesn't know the legitimacy of that. But it's like, didn't Alonso just sign another year for Alpine anyway? So
there's technically, as with all things, there's technically clauses in these contracts, I'm sure, that would allow them to all be broken, but I don't see it happening for most of these drivers.
Also, considering the fact that Alpine have very much been ahead of Aston Martin for the last couple of races at least. Why would he abandon that?
Yeah, those break clauses are pretty ironclad as well. I mean, they all have to go through review with the Contract Recognition Board as well, just to make sure that there aren't any ways that managers or team owners or executives can screw around with drivers, basically, and that all came about after what happened to Nigel Mansell, who was having a great old time in kart in America, right up until the point that Bernie Ecclestone realized after the death of Ayrton Senna that Formula One didn't really have any pulling power in the way of names. So what he did was he played some games and bought Nigel Mansell's contract and subsequently forced Mansell to race at his behest, which didn't go down too well with other teams, other drivers, and that sort of thing.
Move.
Yeah, it's shocking, I know. Wait until you hear about some stuff about Max Mosley. But
I was going to talk about the German bribery trial that he bribed his way out of. Sorry, allegedly. Sorry, paid the fine that they gave him.
Yeah. Good man.
Saved it.
Yeah. I was going to say I can smell the cease and desist.
I was going to say I can hear the sound of the very expensive suit of Bernie Ecclestone's lawyers.
But yeah, like that sort of thing is looked into very, very with a very fine tooth comb by the contract recognition board, just to make sure that nothing untoward can happen to these drivers. But yeah, there are break clauses and performance break clauses and that sort of thing. If a driver's not performing, then a team does reserve the right to basically do a Red Bull and get rid of them. So yeah.
I mean, speaking of Red Bull, I did see a meme like halfway through today's qualifying session saying that what's his face from Red Bull was looking for a break clause in Perez's new contract since he's been underperforming since signing it. But they
should. I mean, they need to give him 2 years anyway.
Yeah.
What Red Bull need to do is stop, giving drivers half a season to compete in it or to get to grips with an incredibly difficult, a notoriously difficult car and a notoriously difficult team. To be fair, and actually give them a chance to, develop a couple of years, like Owain said, like just actually afford.
6 months away from new cars.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And anyway, on that note, we do need to call this because there are other things that this podcast needs to be doing coming up very, very soon. So Thank you very much to everyone that showed up and had a chat. Thank you very much to you guys for some great positions and points on, the session that we've just had. And hopefully we will have an actual race tomorrow, so it can all actually happen. Anyway, I'm never going to shut up about Spa. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks very much.